Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys football. Today, we're taking a look at the Iowa State Cyclones as they come into the 2022 college football season. Before we get into it, just wanted to thank you guys for all the support you guys have shown to the channel. Over 950 subscribers listening to my brother and I talk some college football. Absolutely awesome. So if you guys do like the content, go subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Leave a comment on what you guys think. So let's get into some Iowa State football. Matt Campbell with a real underperformance, his first underperformance in his tenure really at Iowa State. They brought back a lot of guys from the COVID year into that 2021 season, and it was just an unfortunate season for them. How do you view the state of the Iowa State program
That's a tough year because that was a year that looked like, okay, carry the momentum from the prior years where they'd really look like they were building something. Matt Campbell is getting his buzz of is he the next LSU coach and so forth. And yeah, this year, like even with as talented of a team as you can really build names, Iowa, they were kind of a mediocre Big 12 team at the end of the day. So.
And the biggest thing for me is add an Iowa State program, and I get it more than anybody as a Wake Forest fan. You're not going to ever be able to recruit a top 15 recruiting class, maybe even top 20. I mean, Iowa State hangs around 40 to 50. You don't necessarily recruit the best athletes out of high school, but when you do strike gold with a bunch of guys with the extra COVID year of eligibility, you redshirt all your guys as true freshmen, you kind of can strike that gold, and that's what Wake Forest is looking to do the last 2 years. That's what Iowa State looked to do last year. However, they just couldn't really capitalize on all that talent returning. And I kind of view this season as like, what is Matt Campbell really about? I'm a huge Matt Campbell guy. I love how he coaches, but we're about to find out how good of a coach he is in terms of revamping the talent, retooling, because that's what college football is about. How well can you leave talent, have talent go to the NFL?
Because at the end of the day, he's been winning with the same, like the times they've won, which is the past 2 to 3 years, they've like won more games than probably Iowa State generally does.
Oh, yeah.
That's been the same guys the whole way through. So he's going to have to fill a lot of holes. And yeah, this will kind of show is this like Iowa State team for real, or did they just strike gold with some guys like Mike Rose and Breece Hall and Charlie Kohler and some really good football players who led a good team? But yeah, we'll see if they can kind of roll that over and make it happen.
Talk about replacing talent. It starts at Brock Purdy, who Brock Purdy was a solid college.
He wasn't the bus driver of that group, though. That was.
I kind of agree. And as an Iowa State fan, I would be really excited for a guy like Hunter Decker's coming in. He's a big body. I mean, 6'3", kind of built like a fullback. He's got a good arm. He's mobile and unquestionably more talented of a guy than Brock Purdy. Like the ceiling is better. Brock Purdy was a great game manager. He's an accurate passer. There's a reason he was picked as the last overall pick in the NFL draft. Now, Hunter Deckers, I should say, provides a little bit more juice to that offense. And I think Iowa State fans should be really excited about that.
Yeah, and they need to be better. At the end of I really never was a Brock Purdy fan. I didn't think he played with enough composure. He's like, you constantly saw him running around, and that might have been a little bit of a product of a weaker offensive line, which I don't think it's ever been a great unit with him. But I also think he put some of that on himself by holding the ball and then just not being able to navigate the pocket well enough and then making some really not unfortunate, but bad turnovers at terrible times. Yes. And there's been too much of that in Iowa State. Because when you have a guy with like Breece Hall, who's by far probably the best player who's ever been at that school, you have an advantage for sure as a Brock Purdy quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I'm thinking, though, for Hunter Decker's case, I think this is the best wide receiving group that they've had, and it starts with Xavier Hutchinson, who is one of the best. He's going to be probably my first team all Big 12 wide receiver, one of them. I love his game, and I think he's going to be like the alpha in that wide receiver room. An alpha that they haven't always had. I mean, they've relied on going to the running backs and tight ends in the passing game. It's going to shift to going to the wide receivers with no Breece Hall, with no Charlie Kohler. Xavier Hutchinson, I'm looking for like an 1,200 passing or receiving yard year out of him. I think he's certainly capable of doing it.
And they're going to need it because I get that their tight ends weren't high draft picks, but they were really effective college football tight ends. So they do have some holes to fill on that offense. And Yeah, it's big to get Hutchinson back, and Sean Shaw can play too, but
And
Hutchinson needs to
one
be
other
like
guy,
a all Big
yes,
12 kid.
he needs to be dominant. Jalen Noel, I've heard really, really good things about in spring camp as we go into the summer. He looked good down the stretch as I was watching a little Iowa State film. Like this guy is a true freshman last year. This will be, I believe it's going to be his third. He's going to be a redshirt freshman, so this will be his second season with the team. And he's really talented. Like I like his game a lot, so I'd look to maybe have him be like that second guy out of the wide receiver group to kind of make some noise. Turning to the running backs, obviously, there's no way you can really replace Brees Hall as the best running back in the country last year, in my opinion. Got Jarrell Brock and you got Dean Silas. Brock's a guy that came in with Brees Hall in that recruiting class and was actually ranked higher. He was their number one overall recruit out of that class. He's got some good juice to him. He just the thing with that is every run was going to Brees Hall, so you didn't really get to see what Brock could bring to the table there. We'll see
Yeah,
how
and
good that running back
should have gone. That's just a position that's going to get worse. Like there's almost no chance that they do better there. So they're going to need to be a more effective throwing team, and they weren't last year. Brock Purdy there's something missing in that game of his that it just didn't make it happen. So it's probably not the worst thing in the world for them to maybe try a new face, because I think they've underperformed a little bit as a result of Brock Purdy not taking the steps each year to build into like a premier Big 12 quarterback, because he never really got to that point.
Yeah, like when he was young, it's like Brock Purdy this year's a dark horse for a Heisman. The last 2 years of his college career, we're calling him a dark horse for the Heisman. He wasn't even close to that level. I'm not trying to take a dump on Brock Purdy. He just wasn't the quarterback that Iowa State needed to kind of take him over the hump and go win a Big 12 championship.
Because at the end of the day, you need a quarterback when you're in Iowa State. It's good to have a good running back, but you can't win without a Robert Griffin type quarterback where they're just transcendent, better like everyone else on the field. That's what it takes usually when you're a team that from top to bottom is just not going to be as talented as Oklahoma or Texas or Baylor, or those big Big 12 blue bloods. So.
And I think Hunter Deckers has more potential to be closer to that dominant quarterback using his feet and his arm. All reports is he has a really big arm. I know he has a big body. He looks huge out there. So optimistic about kind of that offense. Looking at the offensive line, a group that Iowa State fans probably won't be very happy with me saying this is just kind of overrated. I thought like the last couple of years, like, oh, they have a great offensive line. Like it really wasn't that dominant, especially in the run game. Like they didn't really move people. They didn't really reestablish the line of scrimmage. They're keeping Trevor Downing, which I think is big. He's kind of like that redshirt senior at the center position. But I'm looking for that offensive line just to be solid, be good in pass protection, be solid in the run game. But I don't think losing some of those guys is necessarily going to hurt as bad as some people are saying.
No, and they're keeping 3 out of the 5 with Simmons and Huford also coming back along with Downing. So they have some pieces, and it's been an old offensive line, it feels like, for 5 straight years where they're just bringing back a fair amount of snaps, playing as you don't see sophomores playing on those lines. So, but at the end, just like not a physically imposing bunch. It hasn't been the bell cow of the team at any point, and they give up a fair amount of pressure. And so I don't know. I think it'll be an okay offensive line, but it's not going to be like what everyone thought it was going to be last year, where everyone like coming in, it's like, oh, they're returning all 5 and they're going to be blowing the doors off people. That didn't happen.
Yeah. A lot of those guys I think were a fair amount athletically capped, like bringing back some of these.
And you just don't see pros. You don't see pros across the, like, as much as they're bringing good college snap counts back, they're not bringing, there's just not enough pro talent.
One of the most overrated, and I've learned this the hard way, stat in college football is returning starters and returning snaps. Like, it is good to have experience. I'm not arguing that, but I think it's way too overrated. Like, when you're bringing back guys who like are redshirt seniors who aren't going to the NFL draft, like they're decent, but they're not great. And like returning back those 700 snaps that guy had last year isn't necessarily a great thing when he's just kind of athletically capped. He is what he is. Turning over the defense, the first thing that we always look at when we're evaluating our defenses is that defensive line. How well can they put pressure on the quarterback? I say this a lot. You look at that Georgia team last year. They were dominant because they could get pressure on quarterbacks, get sacks, get negative plays, and then create turnovers. This Iowa State defensive line brings back Will McDonald, probably one of the best edge defenders in the country. And they run that 3-3-5 that's hard to kind of produce pressure, but Will McDonald being one of the best edge guys I think can make that happen.
The problem is they're losing number 58, and I can't pronounce his name. It's a hard one.
He's sick.
But he was a tank, and he was probably the leader of what every disruption that was caused by that football team for the most part was caused by him. So losing him hurts. And I think Will McDonald's good, but quite frankly, if he was as good as people say, he would have gone to the draft last year.
Oh, but we had like a late day 2, early day 3 grade on him. Like,
no, not me. Yeah, you may have. I don't think like the world did, because otherwise he'd be in the draft though. Why wouldn't he be in the draft if he was going to
wants to come back to Ames, Iowa?
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, I don't know. I like Will McDonald a little bit more than you. But at the end of the day, when you're running that 3-3-5, we talked about this on the TCU show the other day, is you're trying to disguise a lot of pressures. You can do a lot of different things. You look at Oklahoma State. They don't have studs on the defensive line, but they led the country in sacks. How they did that was disguising pressures and scheming up pressures. I think that's what Iowa State needs to do. They have a Will McDonald. I do like Isaiah Lee's game, but you got to figure out ways to kind of get pressure on the quarterback in that 3-3-5 where you have all those athletes on the field. You don't necessarily know where they're coming from. I think that's how you got to make it happen for Iowa State. Looking at the linebackers, this is where they really get gutted. Their linebackers and their secondary, losing Mike Rose, losing Jay Kummel, your 2 leading tacklers on the year.
Those guys were like really good too, I think. I mean, just like great college football players. Maybe not like all pro prospects, but just in terms of like the Chris Borland type college football linebackers, they were that.
Yeah, Ryan Vance will be good. You look to Vaughn, and then you get a guy who's interesting, Kobe Reeder. He's a 2016 guy. He's a class of 2016. This is his 7th year of college football. So he's played a lot of college football. He's seen a lot of college football. Interested to see what he can bring. I'm not necessarily optimistic that he's going to come in and be like an all Big 12 guy, but he could be kind of a solid linebacker. And then you look to that secondary. This is really where they get kind of decimated. They lose their safeties in Greg Eisworth and Akeem Young, both guys who I really
great
liked.
Players. Yeah.
I loved Akeem Young. That was tough to see him walk away from.
Yeah, he was a hammer.
And then they lose a couple. I mean, they got decimated in the transfer portal. Looking at that 24/7 transfer portal,
and it wasn't a good unit last year, so that's the real problem. It's like, now you gotta, and you're not rolling in that many transfers clearly. So I don't know. I think you have to be concerned about this unit naturally, just because it wasn't good enough last year. They lost all the talent.
Losing everybody. Yeah. I mean, Anthony Johnson Jr. is kind of the guy. I think he's like 42 starts. I think he's a good ball player. He's going to be the leader of that group. I do agree with you. They're going to need to figure that one out. The best way to cover up a weak secondary is to be able to have a good pass rush, disrupt the quarterback. And so you got to look for the defense coordinator to kind of scheme up those pressures and kind of make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, if Will McDonald can come in and like put together now he's a no question day 2 draft pick kind of guy, that'll be huge for this team. Because last year he was good, but I don't think you saw enough true dominance across the board.
Yeah. So
he's probably going to need to be the guy to just step up and be a tank. And I think what you can be a little optimistic about is you don't know if these linebackers they might be really good players. It's like not necessarily their fault they weren't playing last year because you were hidden by some stars.
Some really good backers.
But Vance Orion played enough last year. He looked okay. And if they can all develop and I'm sure they learned a fair amount from the guys leaving, you might have a good linebacking crew even though you are losing some real studs. It's hard to be wildly optimistic that it's going to be better, but it might be solid.
All right, let's take a look at the schedule. DraftKings has them as 6.5 total wins. Going into this, I think going to another bowl game for Iowa State, I think it's got to be like the number one priority and kind of just continuing that winning culture. Matt Campbell's brung that culture. We're gonna be above 500 team. We're gonna win good Big 12. We're gonna beat good Big 12 opponents. I think that's what Iowa State just needs to focus on doing. Start with Southeast Missouri. That should be an easy win. And then your big bugaboo going into Iowa City. Matt Campbell has not beaten Kirk Ferentz once in his tenure at Iowa State. For as much success as Iowa State has, this would be an absolute massive win. Iowa's going to be a solid team, but like they're beatable. with how bad their offense is, they're an
Yeah,
absolutely beatable
100%.
team. And this is going to be a massive, massive game to start the season. Should be a good win in Ohio. Baylor will be a tough one. They do get them at home. I'm interested to
You're
see
gonna
what
get
Baylor
housed
does.
by Baylor. I'm just kidding.
I don't know if they'll get
I'm
housed
guessing.
by Baylor. I'm not as high on Baylor as you are. They should beat Kansas. And these are the type of games that you got to win. Like Kansas State, that's like a 50-50 in Ames, Iowa. You got to figure out a way to win that. Texas is – I'm not going to be high on Texas until they actually
You never
show
know.
good. Yeah, like
It's gonna be good.
on paper, Texas is sick, but I'm not going to be high on them until they actually come into that game like 5-1. Oklahoma will be a tough one. You do get them at home. West Virginia, that's another one of those games where it's like you got to figure out how to win those kind of football games. Kind of 50-50.
Because those will determine if they're a bowl team or not at the end of the day.
Oklahoma State with Spencer Sanders, who kind of stinks. We'll see how that goes. Texas Tech, they should win, and then TCU to close it out. These will be two big games to kind of close it out against Texas Tech and TCU. Again, two Big 12 winnable opponents that you got to figure out how to come away with 2 wins there. They should be a bowl-eligible team, but I think that's the big key right now. Iowa State, just keep on that winning culture. This might not be – if you're an Iowa State fan, you get once every couple of years, you get a chance to go win the Big 12. Your last 2 years, you had those chances. You kind of squandered. You didn't really squander them. You squandered last year, but they're the COVID year. That was a heck of a team that they put out. And it might be a couple more years until they kind of find their way back into the Big 12 contenders. This year, I don't know if they're going to be contending for a Big
12. Oh, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure you can safely say that's not wildly likely unless Hunter Decker's like infinitely better than that kind of thing. Then they might, but right now it's not looking realistic. Realistically, they're going to be a contender with Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and Texas, all kind of being the 4 horsemen, if you will.
Yeah. That'll do it for our Iowa State football preview. Again, this team probably not going to be competing for a Big 12, but again, bowl eligible.
You want to put together you don't want to regress to the old Iowa State. You want to show that yes, you lost a lot, but you want to be tough. You want to play everyone tough. If you win 6 to 7 games, that's solid.
Yeah.
That's probably what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you can grow and do it the way Matt Campbell's done it and keep talent and develop it and be tough at some point.
Well, appreciate you guys checking out the Iowa State season preview. If you guys do like the content, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate all the support you guys are showing, and we're going to talk to y'all later.